traditional toast that we like to do, Shane. But now we'll see if we can go to the discussion regarding civil asset forfeiture, which, I should mention, is going to be the topic of the next Winter Liberty discussion at the Royal Public Library that Tom McMillin hosts. And it's either the 21st or 23rd. As soon as I find out, I'll let you all know. But I was researching that, and I found this to be a very intriguing topic, and one that's quite infuriating. Because if you were to look for something that showed us just how much we've lost our liberty, just how much government and people in power have taken over and taken away the rights of the people, you're going to have a hard time finding a topic more illustrative of it than this. And as it turns out, the state of Michigan has been an area where we've seen quite a bit of this happening. And I think we're going to see some of it right... no, not there. Okay, it says civil asset forfeiture. It should be there somewhere.
Really? Is that what it's called?
Well, here it is. I see civil asset right down there. How about that? Multi-talented, eh? All right, this should be it. Okay, probably the wrong date on it, but this says. All right, so this will work out well for tomorrow too. Okay, here we go. All right, so it's civil asset forfeiture, the war on liberty, another front in the fight, and a very important one. Okay, now, and it turns out, as I say, Michigan has been ground zero for this in a lot of ways, and this comes down at many times to a very key question: are you innocent until proven guilty? Or are you guilty until you're proven innocent? They have completely flipped things upside down. And there was a case here in Michigan, Bennis versus Michigan. I don't think it was Elaine Bennis from Seinfeld, but Bennis versus Michigan back in 1996. And this is at the Cafe Hayek website I found this. A very strange and shocking case. A not very good husband takes the wife's car and is consummating a transaction with a woman in the car. And the police are there, and they're busted. Well, what ended up happening here is that Mrs. Bennis lost her car. Among other outrages of the situation, they took her car. She said, well, I wasn't one of the people that was involved in the wrongdoing. She didn't even know what was going on. All right? But you're still vulnerable of your assets being seized. You may not be guilty of a crime. You may not have committed a crime, or what may have gone on that you weren't even aware of, and yet this sort of thing could happen. And what the arresting officers and the state said, well, you know, your property is being used in the commission of a crime, therefore, under this doctrine of civil asset forfeiture, we can take your property. This went up to the United States Supreme Court. Chief Justice Rehnquist, I think he was one of those conservative judges appointed by a Republican, writing for the majority, held that the federal Constitution allows Michigan and other states to take property from someone without convicting them of a crime.
What?
Now, there was a precedent for this sort of thing in the past. If you go way back when, they would use this doctrine when there was someone who was not easily brought into court. You know, a person from over, particularly back in the 19th and 18th centuries and things of that nature, said, well, we could never get a hold of this person, but they got some property here, if they could have a trial, and they said, well, it looks like, you know, that this person was guilty, they could seize some property to get some recompense and to get some punishment for that sort of thing. But here, now you have situations that that wasn't the case here. Everyone knew Mrs. Bennis was not guilty of a crime, and she wasn't even aware that her car was being used in this voluntary, though illegal, transaction. And then the Supreme Court said, yeah, but it's been done before, so we're going to let them do it again. This stupid thing about judicial precedence. It's just nonsense. What happened to this poor woman? Okay. Now, again, as I mentioned before, it was usually on multiple levels. Yes. So thank you, Michael Johnny Galt Bates. You're absolutely right, sir. And now, this was used in the past only if people were not subject to domestic courts. It changed with prohibition, the gift that keeps on giving. Now, because of war against your choice of what consumptions you'd like, of what substance you'd like to consume, back in the 20s and very early 30s, it was alcohol, of course, and it created all sorts of problems. Now we have other areas, you know, raw milk, certain drugs, but not all of them. And there's no, by the way, there's no justification, there's no authority in the Constitution for either the state or the feds to do this. They do it anyway, and of course it's a violation of your right to make this decision for your own life. But on top of that, another thing that's come out of this, along with the surveillance state which grew out of this, and other outrages, we have this stupid civil asset forfeiture situation. Next, please. It is crazy. And so it's like they're taking the Constitution and they're just writing it up on their own. And I got this slide. I saw this. Jack Hunter, the great Jack Hunter, had this up on his Facebook page, and he was referring to Peter King. It's about Peter King's nonsense, and that was another announcement I was going to make about his horrible statements about Senator Rand Paul. And Peter King's the one that should be ashamed of himself, and he's projecting his own bad personality onto others. But anyway, the idea here is to take the Constitution and they have this document writing, so just make it up as you go along, which is what so many of these cretins do. All right. So, as it turns out, when the Constitution was ratified, which is a key thing, you'll hear Mr. Levin and others, by the way, always, well, the framers, and the framers are not unimportant, obviously, but the real key thing is the ratifiers, because that's what if it wasn't, that's what they agreed to. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, back in that day, the common law, of course, did not approve of this sort of thing. So this didn't happen for quite a long time, but now we have these really bad cases of judicial activism, and we got these governmental units at all levels running amok against the rights and property of the people, and we're all vulnerable to this in some very shocking ways, as we just saw with this case. Okay, so here's some more recent cases of civil asset forfeiture, right? And there's a group that does excellent work fighting against this called the Institute for Justice. You go to their website and see what they're doing, and you say, boy, we need more people like this. This is a fairly well-known case. I think this has been on Fox News, and I thought they did a pretty good job talking about this one. Out in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, and some of these court cases that we're going to see that come up on this have some strange names. This was U.S. versus 434 Main Street, Tewksbury, Massachusetts. So what they do is, because there's no person who was guilty of doing something, it's the United States versus an asset of some sort. You see?
The motel?
And so it's the motel. This is the motel case. Yeah, so the Caswells have this motel in Tewksbury, a nice family business, all right?
Tired people,
yeah. Yeah, that's right. And occasionally there would be a drug deal on the premises. Well, there were some undercover DEA and dark types that discovered once in a while this would happen. And so the government came in and said, well, we're going to seize your property right now because it's being used for these illicit things. And they said, well, you can't do that. And they said, oh, yes, we can. And after a long and very arduous process, the Caswells did win. And what's finally happened, and this is really heartwarming, is the U.S. attorney has decided he's not going to continue to pursue this. And so the Caswells have won final victory.
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with the Drug Dealers Act.
Well, that's right. There was no...
They didn't even know this stuff was happening.
That's right. See, but that doesn't matter to these people.
We're taking your hotel, your entire retirement, and basically stealing everything you worked for your entire life. I mean, it's...
Thank you. I can rest while you do that. That's right. So, but here's, and he's absolutely right. That's exactly what's happening. I mean, it doesn't get. It's hard to think of something worse than this, other than the NDA, indefinite detention, I guess, and genocide and things like that. But here's victory's final for the Caswells. Here's a nice picture because the government's not going to appeal their Massachusetts civil forfeiture case, but they went through hell, basically. All right. Now we have another one very close. In fact, this is right in the district, I believe. Fraser, Michigan's in the district, and I'll bet George knows these people, or if he doesn't, we will soon. Terry Deco, and they are immigrants from Iraq. So they have the Schott supermarket in Fraser. And Terry and his daughter Sandy Thomas run this nice supermarket. Family business, community business. All right. Now they weren't convicted of a crime. They weren't even charged for the crime. All they were doing was depositing each night's receipts at the bank across the streat. And what the government did, they called it U.S. versus $35,000 and something dollars. Mm-hmm. Well, what kind of nonsense is that? Well, this is now what they were doing, putting the receipts into the bank. That's perfectly standard business procedure. But now, along with the prohibition, another gift that keeps on giving. The stupid, misnamed War on Terror. Big Brother in Washington, D.C. monitors all deposits into these banks, and all withdrawals, too, over $10,000 or more. And in fact, if you're in financial services or in banking or something of that nature, you have to go through continuing education at a number of levels, including anti-money laundering. This is part of the anti-money laundering program that they say. Now, what you're thinking to yourselves, well, what happened if I was doing this and the feds were investigating me and you found out as the financial services guy or the banker? You owe me a fiduciary duty, so you'll let me know, right? It's strictly forbidden to let the person know this is going on. Now, what happened here, they were making these frequent deposits, and it raised a red flag with the IRS. Now that Terry and Sandy had gone to the IRS in 2012, and they talked and they explained what was going on, and the IRS person said, all right, I guess I can see that. They said our business insurance, they said, their business insurance only covered up to a certain amount of cash on hand. They said, if we get robbed, we're going to be out the extra money, so we are diligent about making the deposits into the bank.
How about if they said none of the
So,
damn business?
well, that's what we would all say. They may have said that initially. They may have said that initially, and they were absolutely right. But so yeah, you have to justify doing something that's none of their business. That's a free person's right to do, and a very prudent practice. So it's really outrageous. So anyway, apparently the IRS person said, "Yeah, okay, I can see that. Okay, no biggie." But that doesn't stop them a year later from an IRS lady agent going into their store, saying, "How you do? I've got news. We just confiscated your bank account." And Terry and his daughter Sandy said, "But how are we supposed to pay our workers and pay our vendors?" Her answer, and I quote, "I don't care.
How about you should have invested in
I don't care." And that's their answer to all these things. In fact, one of the aspects of the voluminous, unlawful, and immoral codes and edicts that they've issued is that so many of these things are not only unenforceable, but they're unobeyable, if you will. I mean, and they conflict with each other. So if you follow everything, somewhere you're going to be guilty of something. And many people have pointed out, Ayn Rand was one, but she wasn't the first or the last, to say that's probably one of the ideas here, is that everybody's going to be guilty of something, so they think they can have us all under their thumb.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Next thing here. So what they had to do, they had to take money out of some of their financial accounts, some of their other accounts, investment accounts and things, so they could pay their workers, so the workers wouldn't be victimized by this, so they could maintain their credit with their vendors and that sort of thing. Okay. Well, they fought back, and again with the help of the Institute for Justice, eventually they won. They were vindicated. The IRS returned their money, and now they're suing over lack of proper notice and warning from D.C. And what they're asking for here is the bare minimum really is not enough, but at least it's saying, hey, rather than walking and tell us you took the money, you got to show cause and give us a chance to explain what's going on and defend ourselves against this idiocy. All right, next slide, please. But these people are right over here locally. One day we should probably do a field trip, go over there and buy things from them and congratulate them. So here's Terry. He fought the lawless, the people that are our employees and our agents, allegedly, but work against us, and he won. So great job by Terry. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so here's another situation. Now, so you see all sorts of different types of people who are involved in different types of activities and ways of living. Here's a fellow, Jimmy Thibault, almost like Tebow, but maybe it is pronounced that way. But anyway, so they have this thing, Free Jimmy, they say, because this fellow who was a Missouri farmer, he took his farm and he said, I think rather than doing all that work of raising crops and stuff like that, I think I'll convert it into an outdoor concert venue. So he does that, and of course, once again, as part of the unconstitutional and immoral prohibition program, undercover agents found that there were, from time to time, there were some people that either were transacting drug business or using something, all right? So he's arrested. His assets are seized before any trial. Not only is he not found guilty, before there's a trial they seize assets.
Oh yeah, that's the DEA.
And so those are two common themes of these asset forfeitures that frequently pop up, along with the money laundering deal. The other thing, the other two are prohibition and the denial of the means to a legal defense. So can they get any more unjust? Other than doing physical injury to people before, I guess they can't, all right? So he made a plea agreement. And it was stipulated in the plea agreement that he had done nothing wrong himself. And yet his property was sold to the state park system for over $600,000, $642,000.
Yep. All you got to do is accuse it, and they can steal it.
Now, apparently under Missouri law, it's supposed to go, they have an asset forfeiture to the educational system. But there's one loophole, or one time where that doesn't happen. If you have the DEA involved doing undercover drug investigations, then the money is split between the DEA and the Missouri State Highway Patrol, the two organizations who were responsible for the organization of taking this guy's property in the first place. So they profited mightily from their theft and their violation of his natural rights. All right. So on top of that, he faced a 30-month sentence, was fined $50,000, and ordered to perform 200 hours of community service. Now, I think I just saw where his sentence has been reduced somewhat, and George has an interesting comment.
Did he fight it? Did he appeal it?
Oh yeah, he was fighting it legally, and they have reduced his sentence. I just saw that. I think he's coming out this year, actually. So
he lost the property.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's all gone. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's totally outrageous. The next, please. All right. Okay. Oh, and yes, and this was contrary to the Missouri State Constitution, but he was victimized anyway because of the DEA, and the courts allowed this outrage to be perpetrated. Very sad. Okay. Next, please. All right, and there's a picture of our poor fellow there. I can't see how many strings there. It's either a bass or a guitar. I can't quite tell which. But apparently it was a pretty popular venue, and he supposedly is a pretty good musician there. And I wish Jason Kerner here to see this because he probably empathize with that poor fellow. Okay, so how about in Michigan? I said this is like ground zero in this fight. What's our grade in this? Well, the Institute for Justice rates the different states. They do an asset forfeiture report. They call it policing for profit. And there's a lot of information coming out about this. You can find it on the internet, that sort of thing. And they had all these different cases. You go to their website. There's a whole bunch of them that is interesting. That's sickening. Our forfeiture law is only a D-. And then there's state law evasion grade, which means so-called law enforcement and governmental bureaucrats, are they actually following the rules? Well, of course not. So that gets a D. So the final grade is D-.
What about the private prison?
Well, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah, I don't got so much time here, friend, so, you know. So why such a low grade? Michigan law only requires a preponderance of evidence, not the higher standard of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Secondly, sheriffs, police, drug task forces, and district attorneys share in the booty. The stolen loot is shared by all these groups that are charged with being in charge of all this. So, gee, what a shock that we have this problem. All right. Now, also, contesting property owners, if you find out this has happened, you have to file a claim with the county clerk within 20 days. You have to notify the prosecutor's office and post a bond which may be as high as $5,000. It's frequently not communicated to the property owner. In fact, I saw some cases where the guy had no idea what was going on, and they said, "Oh yeah, pay us in cash." So he shows up and gets $5,000 cash, and then he finds out later that he didn't really need to do that. And then the people in the police department say, "Well, you know, we didn't say he had to do that," but of course they didn't inform him. If you're a private citizen, by the way, and some of these other businesses we're talking about, and you don't fully inform, you know, they say, "Oh, you're guilty of not fulfilling your fiduciary duty," but it's different for these people. You see, it's horrible. Another case that came up that I don't have on here, but this would be unbelievable. It happened in the city of Detroit, and after hours music and party of some sort, and there was some drinking, but it wasn't. There was not criminal activity going on there. But it turns out that to do these sort of things after hours, you have to fill out some arcane and Byzantine forms and that sort of thing. And there was some law from 1909 or something that had a form. It hadn't been filled out by the group doing this. Somebody got wind of it and said, "Oh, this is a great opportunity." So they go in there, and they raid the place. That they're arresting people. They're taking property, including they took everybody's cars and impounded them. Because the crime took place and your property was involved in some way. Yeah. Land of the free, home of the brave. No, land of the fee and home of the slave. All right, next please. All right, so what now? See, I got this from Google Images of a Michigan State Police car. Okay, so what's happening now? Well, a couple of pieces of legislation have actually come forward, and they offer some help. Next, please. Okay, so there are these two bills. Now, one of them is from Representative Jeff Irwin, a Democrat from Ann Arbor. Requires a criminal conviction for forfeiture of assets totaling less than $50,000. Amounts above $50,000 are subject to a court proceeding before they can be forfeited, so that's why he had that thing on there. This is a positive step, and it does deserve our support. I think Campaign for Liberty is in favor of this sort of thing. So this is another area where you can talk to your local legislators and say, "Hey, how about getting on board?" And I'm pretty sure Tom McMillin and Martin Hauerlat would probably be on board with this idea. And speaking of that, next please, Tom McMillin has a bill, HB 5081, which would require greater transparency regarding forfeiture activities, which would be a very positive step from a couple standpoints. One is when you shine the light of day on what they're doing, their activities can't stand it, but nonetheless makes them a little less likely to do bad things, which is one reason why the whole idea about filming police is taking off now, and some of the police don't like that. But also, this apparently also could have transparency for what they do with the money. And so both these things would be very important, and these are items that deserve our support. All right. Additional reforms that are needed. There's apparently there's a Troy attorney, so Stephen Dunn. He's in Reason Magazine, but they were quoting him from the Michigan Capital Confidential of the Mackinac Center. And he suggested some things which sounded pretty good. Time limits on notices to property owners, so they've got to give you timely notice, you know what's going on. Time limits on the initiation of criminal proceedings, so they can't just drag it out while you're just hanging out there without your assets, all your money or your property. The release of funds necessary for legal defense purposes. Gee, we got to get a reform for that? I mean, and then property, if it turns out that you're innocent and it's proven, and they can't prove their case, then you get your property returned and litigation costs refunded. And those sound like pretty good ideas too.
Yeah.
Next, please. All right, but here's the problem. Civil asset forfeiture equals the government confiscating all freedom. So this is what I think is the best idea. Abolition of this abomination. Civil asset forfeiture. Thank you. Civil asset forfeiture enables and funds a vast array of illicit activities on the part of government, on the part of, really creates public tyranny for private purposes of the people that are doing this sort of thing. It also opens up the door for the general government, which we now call federal, to have intrusion into the local affairs of our state and our people, like through the prohibition and these other things, and the money laundering statutes, that sort of thing. So until this reprehensible practice is ended, we are all at risk of losing our life, liberty, and property to corrupt officials. And that's my talk, and with that, because I know you've all been very kind. Oh, next one, please, so they can see the logo. Yes, we see the Great Campaign for Liberty logo. Yes, okay. All right, so who's got a glass? I would like everybody to raise their glass. And I think this toast applies to every outrage that is committed by our so-called agents who are actually victimizing us at every level. Ladies and gentlemen, nullification! Nullification! All right. Thank you very much for coming tonight.